Oh, hopefully that was worked. Should be back. Everything should be working now. Fingers crossed. I hope I've not lost anybody to the, depths of the internet, but we're back. We can all breathe a sigh of relief. So, sorry for that. Yeah. I guess that's why you should never update Windows just before you're about to use something. That's life. Yeah. Anyway, apologies for the delay. Let me get right back on it. I'll go a little bit slower so people who had to disconnect because I closed down will be able to join back in. But the website that we are using today is trinket.io/Python. Whilst that's just loading up in the background, I'm going to put that in chat for everyone, if it wants to. Trinket.io/Python. And when you get to it, you'll see something a lot like this. The first thing that's good to do is click this expand icon down at the bottom. And that just gives you a little bit more room to work with. And you'll see on trinket.io/Python that it already comes loaded with some code. Some fancy code. You might be seeing some graphs. It's got a whole range of things that it goes through. This is just one of them. But we're going to write our own stuff. So we're going to highlight all of this. And we're just going to delete it. And that gives us a nice, fresh canvas where we can write our own stuff. Let me zoom in on that a tad. Yeah. Okay. So, as I said at the start, we're going to be making a paint app. What we want is the user to be able to draw a shape with their mouse. And for that, we're going to be using a very specific Python library, and that library is called processing. And so for the very first line of code, we're going to have is from processing import star asterisk. It's the tiny little icon that's usually hovering above the 8 key. That's going to be where we're going to import everything. It's saying from the processing library, import every single thing that you can find. And that's what we're going to do. Now, processing requires 3 things, and we have to provide it with those 3 things, or it won't really do anything. It'll be quite useless. In fact, I can show you how useless it is. If I press play now, nothing happens. That's because we haven't done anything with it. Now, the first thing processing needs is it needs a function called setup. And this is where we set up our program. Now, we're using Python today, and in Python, the command that shows what a function is def, spelled DEF, and we have to use the setup function. So def setup, and an open bracket and a close bracket. We don't need anything in between them, followed by a single colon. We've now established the setup function, and this is going to be where we put everything that gets our scene ready for the user to be able to draw in it. Once I've typed that out, as soon as I press enter, you'll see that it's added an indent for me. And everything that's inside setup should have one indent from the left. Now, this is a drawing application, And that means it's a graphics application. And whenever we're using graphics, particularly moving graphics, we have frames. And we need to say what rate those frames change. How many times per second do we change? And that's called the frame rate. And we need to tell processing and tell Python what frame rate we're going to use. So frame rate. Notice that it's rate with a capital R and it's all one word. Now I'm going to have an open bracket, and that's where I'm going to put the frame rate that I want to use. Now, this number changes a lot of things about the program, so we're going to start it off quite small, just in case anything goes wrong. We're going to start it off with 20. We want 20 frames per second. And no faster. Yet. We'll get to it. That's just going to be a nice, small starting off point for us. I'm going to press enter, and that puts me on the next line. Notice that we're still indented from the left, so we're still inside setup. This is where I create the canvas, and the canvas is where the user is going to draw. Now, it's not a very intuitive way of declaring the canvas, but in processing, which is the library we're using, you declare a canvas just by typing out the word size, now giving the horizontal size and then the vertical size in pixels. Let's try something not too large because I don't have much screen real estate here. Let's try 500 pixels by 500 pixels. And just to be able to see that, I mean, I could demonstrate it now, but it won't be much use because it would just be white on white, and you can't see that. So we're going to change the color of the canvas. And we can do that with the background function. And when I open a bracket, I need to put a value in here that represents a color. Now, color in computers is a little bit tricky. There's so many different ways of representing colors. And the one that processing understands is the hexadecimal representation of color. So I'll show you the pattern, and then I'll show you how to decide what color to use. So we want to use a speech mark. Notice that Trinket automatically creates a second speech mark for me, which is quite nice. Inside these speech marks, I'm going to start with a hashtag. That tells Python that we're using a hexadecimal color. And the hexadecimal colors have 6 numbers, but they can be letters as well. They can be numbers 0 to 9 or letters A to F. So let's just name a color. Let's say red. If we wanted bright red, it would be FF, because the first 2 characters are how much red there are. 0, 0, because this is how much green there is. There's 0 green. And then there's 0, 0 blue. And that's how we would have a red canvas. So when I press play, not yet, but in a bit, it would show me a red canvas. Yeah, let's go ahead and test that out. So on the next line, I'm going to achieve that by pressing enter. Maybe a couple of times. And then I'm going to press backspace, just until I'm back against the left there, because I don't want to be inside setup anymore. I want to be outside setup. We're done with setup. And then I'm going to type function run, an open bracket and a close bracket. And that tells processing to do its thing, basically. So, fingers crossed, this should. There we are. We have a red canvas. We can't do anything with the canvas. It's just there. It's kind of useless. It's quite a big canvas. But we have a red canvas. If I wanted a blue canvas, I could go into this background setting, into this background here, and this is a hexadecimal number, so it goes in the form red, green, blue. First two characters are red, middle two characters are green, last two characters are blue. If I change these around, I'll get a different colour. So if I wanted, let's say I wanted purple. How do I get purple? I mix red and blue. So first two characters, last two characters, and there we are, I get purple. It's kind of magenta, but close enough. If I wanted black, that would be 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. It gives us black. If I wanted white, it would be FF, FF, FF. And if I wanted something kind of, let's say grey, if F is the brightest and 0 is the darkest of all the colours, then somewhere in the middle is going to be some variation of that colour. So if I had, let's say, 999999, that should be a sort of middle grey. There we are. Now, there's a wonderful website that you can find that shows you all of this. It's the W3 Schools website. It's a bit hard to see on this screen, but you can pick a colour. Let's go for this green, and it tells you that its hex code is 006600. I'll stick that website in chat. If I can ever remember the key combination, there we are. And yeah, it'll tell you all the different tints. It'll tell you how much red is in there, how much green is in there, how much blue is in there. So let's pick a nice, let's go for that kind of corally blue. There we are. That is 0066CC. If I go back to my Python, 0066CC. And there we are, we get that kind of corally blue. Now this is a canvas for a drawing program, so typically it should be white. But let's make it grey just so we can see which part's the canvas and which part's the trinket. So let's go CC, CC, CC. Yeah, that's an acceptable colour. We can draw on that. So how do we actually get the drawing down? Well, we've got processing needs three things. It needs the setup, it needs the run, it also needs to be told what to draw. And we're going to tell it what to draw in our own function. So I'm going to put the cursor in between run and setup. So we have setup on top, then our code, and then run underneath. I'm going to press enter a couple of times to give me some space. And then I'm going to press backspace to make sure I'm against the left-hand side. And we're going to write our own function. And it's this function that's going to do all the drawing for us. So we declare a function with the keyword def. And we can then give our function a name. So I'm going to call this, let's call it, we can't call it draw because that's a reserved keyword. Let's call it scribble. Yeah, scribble will do. It's not a good name, but oh well, I like it. And because this is a function, we have an open bracket and a close bracket, then a colon. And when I press enter, Trinket automatically puts the indent in for me, and I can begin writing my code. Now, when it comes to processing, we need two functions to be able to change the colour of what we write. At the moment, there is no colour set. So I need to establish what colour I want things to be. And there's two things I need to change. I need to change the fill, which changes what the inside of a shape looks like. And I need to tell it what colour it should fill in. So if that one's grey, let's say I wanted to fill in black. So speech marks, hashtag, and then the name of the colour. And if I wanted black, it would be 000000. That sorts out the fill of the colour, the actual body of the shape. But it doesn't change the line, the outline of a shape. And I want to change that as well. And that's using the word stroke. The keyword stroke changes the outline of a shape. And as with fill, we can specify the colour there. It makes sense to make it the same colour as fill though. So I'm going to call it 000000 again, so it matches. Right, we can set about making our first shape then. Now, there are several keywords that we can use to define a shape. Let's draw a rectangle. Well, let's draw a square, the simplest one. And the keyword for that is rect, R-E-C-T, and of course it's short for rectangle. And we need to tell rect where we want it to draw and how big is it going to be. So we need to use coordinates, and if the top left is 0, 0, and the top right is however much, so on. Well, let's just draw it in the top left. Let's say 0 for how much left it is, 0 for how much up it is, and let's make it a nice size. Let's make it 50 pixels wide and 50 pixels long. Notice that I'm putting a comma between each of these, because otherwise how would Python know where one number starts and the other stops? Now, before we can test this out, we need the final component for processing, and that is just above the run command, the line above the run command. I'm going to make sure I'm against the left by backspacing, and we're going to use the keyword draw. Now, draw is a reserved variable that only processing can use, and we're going to say that draw is equal to the name of our function here, scribble. I know it sounds kind of silly, draw equals scribble, they're the same thing, but processing is an odd one, we're just going to roll with it. I'm going to say draw equals the name of my function, and when I press run, we can see that it draws a black square 50 pixels wide in the top left hand corner. Say we wanted to move it around, we could change that to, let's say, 100, and it draws it there. I could change that to 200, and it draws it there. Whatever. Let's just stick it back in the top left-hand corner. Okay, so we've managed to program a shape on the screen, but that's not really a drawing app, is it? There's no user who can come along, move the mouse around, and do interesting stuff. Now for that, we're going to have to add some more to our scribble function. So after I've drawn that rectangle, I'm going to give myself a couple of lines, and I'm going to use another reserved variable from processing. And that reserved variable is mouse pressed. And it's true if the mouse is pressed, and false if the mouse isn't pressed. And I'm going to say if the mouse is pressed, then draw something, and otherwise, don't draw something. So if, and I'm just going to write it straight out here, mouse pressed. Notice that the P is capital and it's all one word. If the mouse is pressed, colon, and enter. Notice that trinket is given as a double indent now. If the mouse is pressed, then I should draw something. I should draw a line, I should draw a rectangle, I should draw a circle. If you start up a paint application, let's say something like paint.net, if that will load. Come on, computer, thinking about it. Yeah, if you grab any paint application, ignoring all these bits of gubbins, and you get the paintbrush tool, and let's make the brush size a bit larger, you can see that's a circle. And when I paint, it's drawing basically in a circle shape. That's exactly what I want to do with my paint application. I want to draw circles wherever the mouse is. So the keyword for that is ellipse. It's a word I can never spell, and I hate saying, but that's the word we got to use. Ellipse. Or ellipse? No, it's just ellipse. And it's a term for an oval. But if you think about it, a circle is just a very regular oval. So the ellipse tool draws anything from ovals to circles to whatever. And when I start the brackets, I need to give it 4 numbers. I need to give it where its coordinates, where it starts, and I need to give it its radius, or radii if it's an oval. So if I want to give it its x position, what x position do I want to give it? Well, if I give it 0, it'll be in the top left-hand corner, which is kind of useless for us. I want it to have the same position as the mouse. So we're going to use the reserved variable mouse dot x, which is the x position of the mouse. Next, I need the y position of the mouse. So use your imagination, think what this might be, and of course it's mouse dot y. Next, I need a radius. Now this is going to be, what's the radius of the circle I want to draw in pixels? Let's just start with a small number just for fun, see what we get. We can always tweak it later. Let's say 10. And we need another radius. Just in case you wanted to draw an oval, there would be 2 radii. We don't want that. We want a circle, so there's only 1 radius, so these numbers are the same. So if the mouse is pressed, it draws an ellipse at the position of the mouse. And if we test this, if I click play, as soon as I click on the mouse, it starts drawing circles. It lets me sort of scribble all over the place. Now, you may have noticed that when doing this, if I move the mouse slowly, it's a nice, thick, solid line. If I move the mouse fast, it's a really spotty line. And this is because this function scribble is being called multiple times per second. And that all depends on this little line of code that we wrote, the frame rate. So if it's 20, that means that this function scribble is being called, it's running 20 times a second. If I change that to a really small number, like 1, the function scribble will run 1 time per second. And so when I draw with my mouse, it only puts a dot down every 1 second, which for a drawing app, it's kind of useless. So we need to put in a very large, high number. And it can be any number you like, but at some point, it will get to the point where your computer can't handle it. It'll be too fast. So have a little experiment, see what you can get. I'm going to try that. What even is that number? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9. Is that 2 quadrillion? 2 quintillion? Some number like that. I don't know. And when I click play, when I draw with the mouse, it's a nice smooth line. I mean, it's not perfect. I can get quite a bit of spottiness on it. But that's because mice move very fast. And Python isn't the fastest language out there. It's pretty good, not the fastest. At least not for graphical things. So yeah, we've got a nice bit of scribbling going on. And it's quite smooth unless someone moves the mouse very fast. Let me just reset that. Okay. And that's, yeah, we've got a drawing app. What more do you want? Oh, wait. Color. It's a pretty terrible drawing app if you can't change the color. So we're going to let the user be able to change the color of their line. So how can we do that? Well, we need to get a form of user input in there. What's better to use than the keyboard? Let's say you press the 1 key and you get to have red, 2 for green, 3 for blue, and so on. Now, I'm writing this inside the scribble function, and I'm writing this after mouse pressed. Luckily, processing has a function for detecting when the keyboard is used. And it's a very imaginative function, and it's called key pressed. So I'm going to write if key pressed. Notice it has a capital P and a colon after it. Basically, what I'm going to say is if the key is pressed, I then need to be able to tell what key is pressed. So if it's key 1, do this. If it's key 2, do that. So I need to put an if inside an if, and we call these nested ifs, right? Because one makes a nest inside the other. So if the keyboard is pressed, then I can say if, and inside brackets, I can say if the key, which is which key of the keyboard was pressed, if the key equals, and then I'm going to use apostrophes now. Not speech marks, apostrophes, just the single one. If you're using a British keyboard, it's next to near to the enter key. I'm just going to use apostrophes here, and there I'm going to name the name of the key. So, for example, if someone presses 1 on the keyboard, I'm going to put a 1 there. And this is an if statement, so I'm going to put a colon after it. If the key is 1, I should do something. What should I do? Well, I need to change the color. But how can I change the color? I can't change fill up here. I can't change it after it's already been set. Well, we're going to have to make a variable. And this is going to be a special type of variable. This is going to be a global variable. So I'm going to abandon what I've been writing so far. In fact, I'm going to put a couple of hashtags in there just to show where I finished off. Hashtags are ignored by Python, except for these ones. Yeah, moving on. I need to declare a variable, and I need to make it a global variable, so it needs to be outside of a function. It needs to be outside of Scribble, and it needs to be outside of setup, and in fact, it needs to be down here at the bottom. Above draw, I'm going to create a color variable, and it's going to store whatever color I want to draw in. So color. And now I need to give it a default value. What color should the user be drawing in when they first start the program? Let's make it red, just off the top of my head. So remember that we describe colors in hexadecimal with an open speech mark, a hashtag, and then 6 letters or numbers. If we want it red, it needs to be hashtag FF0000. Of course, you can use the website I showed you. You can tweak it to whatever you want. This is the first color that the user uses. Okay. So we've established color outside of Scribble, but now we need to use it inside of Scribble. So underneath the function definition, above fill and stroke, I'm going to tell my function, Scribble, that it's allowed to use color. Even though it's a global variable, it's allowed to use it. And to tell Scribble it's allowed to use it, I write the keyword global. You can see that goes purple. And then the name of the variable it's allowed to use. You're allowed to use color. So now I've got color. It means I can change what the fill and the stroke are. At the moment, they are hard-coded. That means that the user has no way of changing it. It's only what the programmer sets it to be. So we're going to delete what's inside fill, and we're going to replace it with color, because now we've got the color, now we should be able to change it. And the same with stroke. I'm going to change those both to color. So let's just do a quick recap of what on earth is going on. This is Python. So we go down here first, because these are functions, these aren't functions. Functions always are written down first, but they're run only when they're called. So we create a variable called color, and we set a default color that the user is going to use. Then we start constantly running the Scribble function. So we go into the Scribble function, and then we tell it that it's allowed to access color. It's allowed to see what the variable color says. So we set the fill of any shape we draw to the color. We set the outline of any shape we draw to the color. Then we draw a rectangle in the top left. Then if the mouse is pressed, we draw lots of circles behind the mouse. And if the key is if the keyboard is pressed, and if that key is 1, then what should we do? Well, we should set the color. So I need to reset the color variable. So I'm going to replace my load of hashtags with color equals, and then I need to choose what color gets associated with the key 1. So let's say when the user presses 1, they get blue. Yeah, let's do that. So speech marks, hashtag, And then we have the code for whatever color that is going to be represented by 1. So blue is 0000FF. And yeah, I think that's everything. Let me try. Okay, so we can see that this square in the top left has turned red. That means that the color we're using is red. So when I draw with the mouse, it's a red line. When I press 1, it should switch that color to blue. Fingers crossed, here goes. There we are, it's switched to blue, and now when I draw, it draws with blue. I am not a very good artist. And yeah, well, essentially we just carry on making more colours with more key combinations. So let's do, what happens if someone wants to change back to red? Let's do that first. So this is my code for what happens if they press 1. It switches things to blue. On the next line, I'm going to get that by pressing enter, and then I'm going to press backspace once. Can you see that my cursor is now in line with the second if? So, yeah, let me explain that a little bit better. When I press enter, Trinket automatically puts 3 indents in for me, 3 jumps from the left-hand side, and anything I type here will be inside the second if. I don't want it inside the second if, I want it inside the first if, this if here. So if I want it outside the second if, but inside the first if, I need to make sure it's indented inside this one. So it's 1 indent to the right from this. So to show you how the easier way to get it is, I click at the end of the last line I wrote, I press enter, and I press backspace once. Okay, now if I want to do what happens if a different key is pressed, what happens else if, well, I'm going to use the keyword elif, and that stands for else if. So if it's key 1, brilliant, change the color to blue. Else, if it's key 2, change the color to red. So key equals 2. And it's essentially the same line of code, it's just elif instead of if. Finishes with a colon. And here I can change the color to, let's go back to red. So FF0000. Okay, so we're now painting in red. When I press 1, I'm now painting in blue. When I press 2, I'm now painting in red. And we can carry on adding more colours. I'm just going to do green. You can add as many as you like. Remember to use that website I showed you if you wanted to create any more. But elif key equals, let's say 3. Then color equals hashtag 00FF00. So 1 is blue, 2 is red, 3 is green. I'll go on then, I'll add a couple more. Just because I can, and it's nice and easy to do. Just lots of copying and pasting here. Change that to 4, change that to 5, change that to 6. Let's have purple, which is FF00FF. Let's have yellow, sorry, kind of orange yellow. Let's have FFFF00. And finally, a kind of cyan color, 00FF. Okay, so 1 is blue, 2 is red, 3 is green, 4 is purple, 5 is yellow, and 6 is cyan. Okay, so we've added some colours. It's a bit more of an interactive, colour drawing app. What happens though if I want a larger brush size? At the moment, this brush is quite small, so I can write some words with it, but I quickly go off the page because it's too big, it's too small. Let's change that. And there's no nice way of doing this in processing, and it's not really online, but we can actually ask the user what brush size they want. And for that, we need a key that tells us that the user is requesting a different brush size. Do beg your pardon. So, like with the numbers, to bring up a letter key, what happens when a letter key is pressed, I can have an ellipse statement. And as usual, key equals, and instead of putting a number in here, I'm going to put a letter. So let's say the user presses B to change the brush size, B for brush. What can I do? Well, I'll need somewhere to store the brush size and to store the default brush size. So I'm going to need another variable. And it's going to be exactly like the color variable in that we describe it at the bottom. So I'm going to make sure I'm flush against the left. And I'm going to create a variable, and I'm going to call it brush size. And let's say it's 20 by default. Yeah, let's say 20. Brush size equals 20, and I'm doing that above draw at the bottom. Now, Scribble needs access to that, so I'm going to go back to the top. And I'm going to give access to brush size by typing global brush size. And now I can change the brush size. Oh, one more thing. Yeah, before I change the brush size, I need to actually use the brush size. Silly me, should have paid attention. And the brush size is going to be whatever the radius of the circle that we're drawing behind the mouse is. So at the moment it's 10 pixels in radius. We don't want it to be 10 pixels in radius, we want it to be brush size in radius. And the same for the other one. So brush size. Mouse X, mouse Y, brush size, brush size. And once we've got that, we can actually start setting the brush size. So, if the key that is pressed is B, we should probably ask the user, what brush size would you like? And we need to store whatever the user writes, so we're going to have a variable to store their answer. I'm going to call it answer. Answer equals input, because we're requesting the user to give us some input. Input. And then in speech marks, because this is a piece of text, what brush, or as I typed it, brush, what brush size would you like? It's gone off my screen a bit, but it's definitely there. There we are. Answer equals what brush size would you like? Now, there's a small issue with that. What happens if our user is a bit annoying and decides to put in, rather than a number, decides to put in the answer sausages? You know, you can't have a brush size of sausages. So we need to make sure that our user is not being an idiot and they've actually typed in a number. And we're going to do that with another if statement. So this is our third if statement in a nest, because we've got one there, and we're about to write another one. Our third nested if statement is if, and in an open bracket, if that answer, if the user's answer dot is digit, open bracket, close bracket. And what we're doing there is we're asking, is the answer a number? If it isn't a number, do nothing. If it is a number, we should set the brush size. It's very important. It's something that in computer science we call sanitizing your inputs, because unfortunately lots of users out there are idiots and they will type in some very stupid things into your programs, and we need to protect against that. Otherwise they might cause the program to crash, and then they'll blame you and not themselves. So if the answer dot is digit colon, so if it is a number, then we can actually set the brush size to it. So brush size equals, and we need to put answer, but we need to doubly check that answer is a number. So it's an annoying hack, but it's necessary. We're going to write int, and then inside the brackets after it, answer. We're converting answer into an integer, and then we're setting brush size to be the answer. I know it seems like that's unnecessary when we've already checked whether it's a digit. It's annoying, but we just have to do it. So we convert answer into an integer, aka a number, and then we set brush size to it. Okay, let's play that. Let's see where we get. Okay. That's my normal brush size of 20. When I press B, it's asking me what brush size would I like. Let's make it huge. Let's make it 50. As soon as I press enter, looks like nothing happens, but in fact, can you see how my brush size is much larger now? Let's make it huge. Let's make it, to access that I press B. What size do I want it? Let's go 100. Okay, let's do that in green. That's much larger now. Okay, let's press B again. Let's make it, 500. And let's do this in yellow. And, oh, it almost takes up the entire screen. And yeah, that's pretty feature complete. It's pretty. Well, you can't really ask for much more out of a drawing app. So how do we make people want to buy this? It's very simple. Well, as an extension, I'm going to add in a new feature that's completely unnecessary, but it's just fun to have. We're going to have a new function, a new option that when you start drawing, it will randomly change the color as you're drawing. So, how are we going to do that? Well, first things first. I'll need a way of switching it off and on. And if I want it switched off and on, then I'm going to have to store a variable that stores whether I want it off or on. Yeah, I'm talking too much, but yeah. Basically, I'm going to need a special Boolean variable which stores either true or false whether or not I want rainbow mode on. So, new variable, which means I need to write it down at the bottom. And we're going to call this variable, rainbow mode. And we're going to set it to off by default, so false. And notice I write false with a capital F. what should happen is, if I were to press, let's say, R on the keyboard, it sets it to true, and if I press T on the keyboard, it sets it to false again. So I can toggle it on and off. Now we need to access this variable inside the scribble function. So and again, I'm going to write global at the start, rainbow mode. And that just gives access to the variable to scribble. And then I'm going to have down here, after my bit of code that asks about the brush size, I'm going to make sure I'm in line in the right place, and I'm going to say elif. The key this time is, let's say, R. Then rainbow mode is going to be true, and elif key equals T colon. So if it's T, then rainbow mode is going to equal false again. So we've just written the code that will toggle whether or not rainbow mode is on or off. Now let's actually program rainbow mode. And for that, I'm going to go to almost the top of Scribble. And we're going to have a look at these three, these lines here, this fill color and stroke color. Now, if I'm in rainbow mode, I want to be able to change color to be something else. At the moment, color is set by whatever number key you press on the keyboard. So I want to add a new bit of code around these that says if rainbow mode is on, then change color to something else, else don't. This is going to apply to these three lines here. So I'm going to start writing above, and I'm going to write a new bit of code, and I'm just going to copy and paste from there when I need to. So first, let's put the piece of code for what happens if the if rainbow mode is true. I'm going to say if rainbow, if I can spell it, if rainbow mode, just going to put this in brackets, equals true with a capital T. If it's equal to true, then I should change the color to some random color. So for that, I'm going to write color and then equals, and then I need to use a function that's taken from the random library. The random library built into Python, but I need to import it first. I need to tell Python that I'm going to be using the random library. So I'm going to go up to the very top of my script, line 1, and I'm going to write underneath import random. And once I've done that, I could go back to my incomplete line. Color equals random dot choice, and then inside those brackets I'm going to tell it what it's allowed to choose from. At the moment it doesn't know what to choose from. We need to give it a list of colors, and a list in Python is shown with square brackets. So I'm going to start off my list. I'm going to open a square bracket, and I need to give it a list of colors all separated by commas. So we've looked at doing colors before. We do speech marks, we do a hashtag, and then a series of numbers. So let's do red, FF0000. Then after that, making sure I'm outside of the speech marks but still inside the square brackets, I'm going to write a comma. Then my next color, which is going to be green, which is 00FF00, comma, speech mark, hashtag, and yeah, it's going to be a while. The more colours you put in here, the more varied your rainbow's going to be. Let's not put in too many because I don't want to be here for the rest of my life. Let's do purple. Let's do one more. Let's just do cyan. 00FFFF. Okay. So we've changed. We've given it a random choice of colours. You can put as many colours into that list as you like. Now we need to actually set the fill and the stroke to B colour. So I'm going to grab these two and I'm going to just get rid of them for now. And I'm going to put them underneath colour, but I'm going to make sure that they are correctly aligned to be inside this if. At the moment, rect is outside the if, and that's what I want, and I'll go into reasons why later. But I want these three lines inside the if. Give me some space. So what shall I do if rainbow mode is false? Well, this is where I want to set fill and stroke color again. But I also want to draw the rectangle up in the top left. So we had a rectangle in the top left to show us what color was currently selected. If I'm changing color constantly, it's going to be changing that rectangle constantly. It's really uncomfortable to the eye to see it flashing so fast. And in fact, it's quite dangerous for some people. So I'm only going to draw that rectangle if rainbow mode is false. So else, this is the block of code that happens if rainbow mode is false. We can set the fill to be color again. We can set the stroke to be color again. And then I'm going to get my rect and I'm going to press tab in front of it to bring it inside the else. So yeah, that might have been a bit confusing, but don't worry, I will be posting the code live online as soon as I finish this. But there we are. That should enable rainbow mode. Let's test it out. Okay, so rainbow mode is false, which means that I can draw any color that I've set up. But as soon as I press R, we do go into rainbow mode, which means when I draw, it randomly chooses what color to draw. Let's make the brush size a bit bigger by pressing B. Let's make it, I don't know, 50. That's 500, don't want 500. And there we are. We've now got a very psychedelic painting app. And let's say I want to go back to being out of rainbow mode. I can press T and whatever color I choose. And yeah, I'm back to normal. And yeah, that pretty much completes it from me. I hope you enjoyed making a small painting app. It's a great little introduction to pixels and hex values. And if you want more, then give a check of the Technocamp's Activity Pack website, where we have several activity packs that talk about hex values. And you can access that just by going to technocamps.com and cry as your internet crashes. There we are, just about. And yeah, you can find several down there. The one I recommend for talking about hex values, there's the Pixel Art Activity Pack, and that goes very much into hex values and other hex colors. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed, and sorry for the small delay at the start of stream, but otherwise, have a good evening. Goodbye.